Transformations in supply chain are adventures with real people, full of opportunities and challenges. Every month on the 15th, join Marcia Williams in a podcast of real stories with real people transforming supply chains. Marcia, experienced supply chain consultant, speaker, author, and host of the show, interviews guests who have led amazing transformations. If you are or want to become a change agent or a leader with high impact, this podcast is for you. And you will know it all. Strengths, vulnerabilities, successes, and failures. From how to perform data analysis through wearing your favorite tie or red shoes to boost your confidence. Transformations are adventures with real people. Learn from their stories and claim your head start. In this episode, we have the pleasure to introduce Gustavo Santamarina, Director of Medical Devices at Nubenco Enterprises. Nubenco is a mid-sized company with a worldwide distribution of pharmaceutical products and medical devices. Gustavo manages all steps of the business in medical devices and pharmaceuticals value chain, including but not limited to strategic planning, tender analysis and preparation, procurement, contract analysis and negotiation, project management, logistics, customer experience and relations, and branding. Gustavo is a go-getter, smart, innovative, turn-over-every-stone mentality, quite able to uncover hidden facts and details connecting the dots towards an articulate meaning. A lively personality with a strong sense of integrity, nobility of purpose, and a zest for conceiving and communicating ideas in creative ways.
Welcome, Gustavo. It's a pleasure to have you from Manhattan in New York City. It's an honor that you are our guest in one of the first episodes of Adventures in Supply Chain. So thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, Marcia, and it's always good to see you again, and it's really great. I'm very excited about your project, your new endeavors, and all the best to that, and I'm very happy to be part of it.
Great. So let's start with the questions, and we hope, I'm confident that they are going to be very helpful for the audience. So let's start with the failures, because typically we start with the successes, but we would like to know everything about transformations. We would like to know the good, the bad, and the ugly. So everything. We want to know it all.
Right, okay, yeah. Well, it is okay to start anywhere, So to me, in a way, things are like a continuum. Some people say, well, it's always good to start with, let's start with the good news. We have to deliver news, and some are good, some are not good. Yeah. Let's start with the good news. Tell me the good news first. Okay, well, success and failure to me are, in a way, both faces of the same coin. So many times you can have one without the other, right? And sometimes, if what it was a terrible failure leads to an extraordinary success. And sometimes not capitalizing in a success could potentially lead to a failure, because we are somehow forever condemned to work, for success all our lives in whatever we do, right? Yeah. So nothing is really granted and just goes like this is the way it's going to be. So it's important to always be questioning, or be asking, or be always striving for a continuous improvement. So that makes that, in a way, that coin turns around all the time. That success, failure, and the whole thing is a continuum. So we start with what we call a big, failure. I was years ago. I was managing this project, and by the way, I work with this medical device company. We are suppliers of hospital consumables. The term will be single-use medical devices, right? But you would think of syringes, gauze, this kind of products that are for everyday use in the healthcare environment, right? So we are essentially a supply company, a procurement company that provides to all these different organizations these type of products. And we have been doing this in an OEM model of procurement. So meaning OEM, the original equipment manufacturer, right? So meaning get into these plants, the companies in different countries.
Yes.
We would procure from abroad, from countries that shall remain nameless. We're not going to mention them.
Yeah.
But what you can imagine, it's, some countries have more common sources of products. Anyway, so we're doing this procurement and on OEM basis. So essentially, everybody or most people know what that means. So essentially, you get to a company that manufactures a product. You say that product that you manufacture for other people, I would like it for me too, but on this label, on this particular condition, quantities, or whatever it is, so tweak of the product. But essentially, it's the same thing, but now I want it too.
Yes,
right?
with different label, yes.
Exactly.
At the end, it's a different product, but similar, very similar.
Correct, that's right. So I was, years ago, I was managing in this company I was working for at the time, for medical devices procurement, and we had been coming from a major change in the structure of the company. The management of the company had been, part of it replaced in this section that was leading the procurement effort. This change made surface problems that had with that management that had been conducting the company in ways that were not really conducive to the benefit of the company, right? So, but to their own, different goals,
Yes.
conflicting goals.
Yes, like a conflict of interest.
Yes, correct.
It's quite common, right?
Yeah,
That happens.
yeah, absolutely. And so this change led to an immediate, apparent, very clear improvement in revenues. We had more orders from customers, and things started to look much better. And that was the moment to capitalize on the good things, the good changes that just happened. That's what I was saying about the about phase, the success failure.
Yes.
When you just sleep on the laurels, and in a way, I was in charge of the project to capitalize. Okay, what's next from where we came from? This was about a decade ago, and the following 5 years, that is up to 5 years ago, would have been the continuation of this improvement that started with that removal of that management. And and now when I think of it and then just look back, I say, well, it's a story of a missed opportunity. And we all have this kind of, I think everybody can relate even in our personal lives, say, gee, I should have done this, I could have done that, and I didn't do it, and that was a missed opportunity. What if the regrets? But this is where we also, I would say that we have to, stop for a moment, cut the negative self-talk and say, well, every missed opportunity can potentially lead to say, okay, great, now I'm going to do something with it. So it doesn't really matter much the failure, but what we do with it. And this was a case that we have back then. So in hindsight, I was responsible for that project and didn't really, at the time, it didn't really produce the results that the ownership of the company wanted. But in theory, so we had this big menu of suppliers, about 50 suppliers, companies, manufacturers in this OEM scenario that I was describing recently. And we wanted to, so the vision, the idea was to say, well, we want to have a simpler supply chain with, let's say, 20 suppliers, but at the same time, we want to reduce cost. We want to improve, or at least maintain the quality, and we want to keep the integrity of our portfolio. So we don't lose products and market share.
Yes.
And so that looked like a pretty clear vision, crisp. But in hindsight, I say, well, that was what it would have been, but this is not the way it happened. Say, gee, we're doing okay. Well, let's simplify, let's reduce the cost. Typically, you say, well, we want better cost, more profit. We want to simplify things. So we start to take one action and then another action and another action instead of just in hindsight to say, well, had we defined that vision clearly and say, well, let's establish this what we call SMART goals, that are specific, they're measurable, right? They are all these qualities they're traceable. And instead of that, we just, okay, let's do it, right? Let's start walking. Yeah. But if you don't know exactly where you're walking to, you eventually are going to get to, going in any direction. It doesn't matter.
Yes, that's a great point, Gustavo, that we need to have clear objectives so then we can define success or not. Right, because then when we start taking action, and it's great that we take action because we need to move fast, we need to execute, not only to have a strategy, but we need to have clear objectives, as you mentioned, a clear vision, right? So we can define if we are accomplishing it or not.
Right, and I would say that first to have a clear sense, a clear vision, and then define the problem, basically. Yes. What's the problem to solve? In life, in general, when we ask the right questions, that's all we need. All we need to know is just to ask the right questions. Once you ask the right questions, you articulated the answer as well, because the question and the answer are part of the same, two faces of the same entity.
Yes,
right?
You're right.
So that's what happened. The other thing, so first to have a clear vision that one could relate to, and that was exciting. And then, okay, well, what is, define the problem, meaning what is it that we need to do, the goals, and then act, let's say, holistically, not just, we have to do all these different tasks, but instead of, some of them really require a sequence, a progression, but in general, if you try, let's say, for example, let's improve the cost. Well, you improve the cost, but if at the same time you are not considering the quality, you're not considering the integrity of the portfolio at the same time, you might find out that, sorry enough, that you solve one problem, they create other problems.
Yes, that's right. And actually, in that case, we are not reducing cost, because if we are lowering the quality, then we will have issues with our customers. So as you were saying, everything is related.
Yes. Right? So that in hindsight, I would say, well, we could have actually first have defined a clear vision and then act all at the same, not necessarily at the same time, but keeping everything in consideration when we proceed. So, but this is we're talking about failures, right? So it could have been the company in 5 years could have triplicated the revenue. That's a fairly accurate estimation, but it did not happen that way. So when you think, well, we could have done this and it did not happen, then the regrets, but we didn't stay with that. The story continues, and it's a story that progresses to it's not an ending because it's still in progress, right?
Yes.
But what I was saying, that a failure, if we do things, if we learn what we pick up the pieces and move forward and are resilient, we always have a chance to, life can be very forgiving and can give you another opportunity. So, because sometimes what it takes is many failures, many final defeats. Actually, when you look back and say, but they were so close, so close. All they had to do is just one more step, and they will have won, and and did not. So never give up. That would be the other thing. That's
great, because we need to learn from failure. We need to accept that it happens, and as you were saying, what matters is that what we do with that, right? Not stopping our effort, continue and doing it better with the knowledge and experience that we have gained in the process.
And in the end, I would say it's not just a matter of, it's not only a matter of skills, it's not only a matter of knowledge, but a lot of this has to do with the moral fiber of the person, actually.
Yes.
With who you are as a human being, that will communicate, transpire immediately to what you do with your work, what happens with the company. It's just directly related. They're not separated. They're not separate things. Part of the same.
Yeah.
So that's why it's so important to really work in general. I would say on yourself, wherever you are at the company, either you're at the top of the food chain or you are just one, wherever you are, work on yourself. The more you work on yourself, your customers and your suppliers will thank that. They will see that you're communicating value, which is the whole purpose of we are really doing all this. And anyway, so you were mentioning, I think, challenges on the supply chains, right?
Yes. What are the challenges that you find when you are making these transformations that are amazing? What are the challenges? Maybe some technical aspect, or maybe people involved, how to communicate with them, as you were saying.
Right. Well, every industry has a particular challenges, but I think we are if you really think of it, we are in a very this small ball that they call the world, and actually we're all interconnected, and it's a small place actually with challenges in the environment, challenges in with population, the natural resources, and artificial intelligence. There's more people, and then less people is necessary to produce more products that less people has the capacity to purchase. So there's a lot of challenges in the world, right?
Yes, many complexities, and also in your supply chain too, right?
Absolutely, and by the way, I like to. We're talking earlier, on this that. We call it supply chain, but I was thinking recently, I say, as a chain is it's a connection of links, right? They're all linked, and then I would say, but they are like discrete elements, like bit by bit, right? Of elements, right? All interconnected, linking from A to Z, but. I was thinking also that every link nowadays, things are so complex that whatever affects the customer also affects the supplier, and affects the environment, and affects the industry, and affects the regulatory environment, and so on. So and the patients down the line for the medical products, right? So to me it's more like I would say like a rope, like when everything is knit strongly together and in parallel. It's not like I do this thing and then you will do that, and no, we are all doing things at the same time. And that, by the way, is more in the aligned with the rather modern ways of approaching to a supply chain, like the Six Sigma, or like the SCORE model, or all these things that have been floating around for quite a while, and everything is really, really interconnected. I would say for every industry has a challenge, but I was mentioning what happens in the world in general, so and the artificial intelligence one key element, and have more population, all this the strain in the natural resources that you'll see all that, right? But if you go down to the medical, we deal with perishable items. So in a way, it's like I like to call it jokingly like a supermarket. We're selling milk. We have these sterile products, and they have a shelf life.
Yes.
And then, or you like bread in the supermarket. You go one day and it costs, I don't know, $5 or $3 the loaf, right? And you go, the same loaf stays there, and you go 5 days, a week after, and then they put it in special with sticker. Taken out, because it has a different value, because it's a perishable item.
Yes.
So one problem that we have is that we work with perishable items, but also items that could affect directly the health of a person, right?
Yeah.
For example, let's say we have this, I know, this pen, right? If it doesn't work, I mean, I would be frustrated. I may go to the store where I bought it and say, "Oh, you sold me this and it doesn't work," and that's the end of it. I mean, you replace it.
Yes.
It's really no major issue, right? However, if this was, let's say, a key component in an airplane that is flying and it fails, right, and the plane goes down, right? Well, that's a difference.
Yes.
Or if this is a stent in a patient, inside the body of a patient, it also fails and that person dies, it's a different thing.
Yes,
right?
it depends on the context, on the situation,
Yeah.
so all of that we need to consider, yes.
Right, so besides I would say as a specific challenge for the medical devices, for the health medical devices field, the fact of these are items that deal with life,
Yes.
and at the same time there are perishable items. So how to deal with them in terms of the value from the business point of view, right? And also there are other challenges nowadays. So people who are familiar with the medical devices will know that the European regulations are changing. In the world, there is like to put it simple, there is like a regulatory requirements. There are barriers to put any product into a market in any industry, right?
Yes.
But particularly in the medical industry or the health, if you want to, let's say, sell this syringe in a specific country, they will put barriers, that regulatory barriers. So the product will have to be, they will have to guarantee the government to somehow monitor and confirm that the product is safe to be placed in the market and so on.
Yes, all about compliance, right?
Correct. That's right. So every country has their own regulations. Of course, the most advanced countries are the ones that are leading the whole the conversation. In those countries, they put together a regular body. A forum, let me put it that way, that had different names through the years, but nowadays called the Medical Device Forum, and that you have essentially the European group of people, and then you have the US, North American groups, teams, and then you have the Japanese, the Australian, and I think those are the biggest ones, I believe. As part of these, teams that together have been developing all these regulatory, requirements for the products, and the whole world is going to a convergence of, every team. They're starting to speak the same language, and I would say that the United States is the leading one. Actually, that trickled down to Europe, and then Europe. For a long time, it had some kind of protagonism in the world. You talk about the CE mark, everybody says, does it have CE mark? Yes. And it's like, because something visible. The US, we don't have it. It doesn't have a US mark. We don't have that, right? We have the FDA approved, but the CE is like some kind of a icon, people say, wow, the CE mark. That's right. It's more visible. That's why people somehow resonates more, the European regulation. But both of them, the European and the US, have come together nowadays. In particular, in the European Union, and now, as we speak, in about 3 months from now, in May, the regulations that led to that little CE mark that you see in any product or many products, particularly in the medical devices, the regulations that rule that will be enforceable. They will have constantly new regulations. Will be enforced in the end of May of this year, just 4 months from now.
In a few months. Yes.
3 months, and it will put things. Will be mandatory. Will have an impact for the suppliers and for the medical device industry at large. So even for the patients, there will be more transparent. The word is not transparency. It will be more accountability, more visibility into who's doing what and what happens. There is a problem. So there is a benefit for the patients and for the healthcare system, globally. Not talking about the U.S. in general. But at the same time, it will pose a new challenges for small companies or
Yes.
even big ones too.
Yes, of course, right? To comply with the new regulations, to keep updated on the changes.
Yes, so it will. I would say that it's going to be in the coming months and maybe a year or two. You will see. I'm talking about this year, 2020. Yes. We are in February, what it is, 17 today.
Yes.
We'll see changes happening. Companies, new companies, reaccommodation of the industry. I would say that is another thing that happens with as a challenge, right?
Yes.
So. Yeah, and we're talking about also earlier you were mentioning tools and you were curious about the Excel.
Because you also mentioned visibility, and I was wondering if you have those issues with visibility, but about inventory for planning, right? Where are the products, and if you have any tools, how do you manage that?
Right. Well, that's one of the things actually with the regulatory change I was mentioning that is happening now.
Yes.
The first quarter of this year. One of the things is actually to make products more traceable and what is called post-market vigilance of the product. But the products are identified in ways that are unique that can be traced typically through barcodes. Some form of barcode or data capturing, which could be a barcode or other things, yes. But typically it's a barcode. And that, that is the visibility. Let me say that there's more people that are curious, basically. It's not just the supplier or the company that puts the product into a market, but also the visibility actually happens all along the chain or the supply chain or supply cord, like
yes,
right? Like an umbilical cord in a way. But yeah, because the customers want to know, the suppliers want to know, the regulatory authorities want to know, and purchasing agencies, entities also want to know inventory levels in the case that they have. To guarantee what is called, the safety inventory levels of procurement safety, the continuity of procurement.
Yes.
So let's say that there is a major health crisis. Are we going to have the products that we need? Yes. Case in point, we were talking about that, the coronavirus,
no, yes,
the famous face masks.
Today, yes.
Gone.
Yes,
right?
the impact that it has on supply chain.
Yes.
Nobody was expecting that, the coronavirus.
Right. So so yes, as far as the visibility, it's a whole thing that you have been actually with your book and your work. You're investigating all these aspects, right? But one simple thing of doing some accountability was to use this spreadsheets. Now, one popular one is Excel, but I don't know. But most people use that. But and some people might think that it has they say, "Oh, you're using Excel." What do you think? What some people in your experience, right, or in your knowledge, that might think that maybe something negative about using spreadsheets?
Yes,
what would be negative about
sometimes the negative connotation that I have noticed about Excel spreadsheet is they say we need to use the systems and not Excel. But the issue is that sometimes we don't have all the functionalities built in the systems, or we don't know how to use them too. So Excel is very powerful in many cases. That's what I have found. So it's very common for companies to use Excel, and you may think, but that doesn't happen in a large business. Well, I would say not necessarily, because when businesses start growing by acquisition, then they get all of these different systems. So we initially cannot work in sync. So what do you have? We need an alternative tool unless we can transition and to get to the point that we can have a single source of truth. But Excel is an excellent tool. maybe you have some experience too, Gustavo. I have seen your spreadsheet. It's fantastic.
I like it.
It's fantastic. It has every phase that you can imagine. You know what's going on with the inventory.
Yeah.
So as I say, sometimes the system don't have that those requirements, and maybe it's because they don't know the supply chain needs to know that piece of information, right?
Right, and it's just, I mean, it's a tool, it's a powerful tool, but essentially a tool, and the tool is just as good as in a way as the user. You can have a chisel. I with a chisel, I don't know what color is go and just not much. But if I was Michelangelo, I would have to produce it of David, right?
Yes.
So it's the same tool.
Exactly.
The tools, the good thing with Excel, it's a good tool, but that's not the be all and of crunching the numbers. It requires to use it with creativity. It requires to, so for example, sometimes I use it, it's just fun to, what is there, you put it in ways that you say, oh, I can do it in ways that was not actually devised that way, but you twist, that's the creativity of the user. You twist it in a way that actually make it work for you in fun ways, right? So you get excited about it and you start to see results on that. But the numbers have to be validated, because if you put the wrong formula, you don't understand, first you need to understand what you're doing, and then put the numbers there, and it will help you. But it won't teach you the field. It won't teach you. It won't solve the problem. What we do is calculate things for you.
Yes.
It might give you some insights that can give you ideas, but then you have to do the thinking. Excel won't. So if you put the wrong formula and then you don't understand in what order the problem first. And then you trust whatever Excel gives you, and there's a fallacy there, and you put a fallacy, you get a fallacy back.
Yes, like garbage in, garbage out, right?
Precisely, yeah, absolutely. So and you have to also keep it simple. When you use these Excel tools, put it in a way that is easy to communicate. Really, don't try to do absolutely everything with it, and the numbers should be relevant, validated, keep updated. Simple, so that people are all along the chain or the rope can understand those numbers and easily communicate. So it's a great tool, but the other things, okay, we have the Excel, now we have an ERP system, right?
Yes.
Like, for example, the company I work for, I don't want to advertise, but anyway.
It's okay that we use SAP Business One. We can use a different application too, but at that moment we decide based on the business requirements that SAP Business One was the right tool, because it's SAP solution for small and mid-sized businesses.
I would say the key word is the customization. Say, okay, what will be the challenge of it? Is this a good thing? Well, it is a good thing. Absolutely, it's a good thing. But provided you actually, so the problem is it's a commercial product. Whoever created it tries to address a rather complex problem.
Yes.
So when you start to build it, only companies that are powerful enough that put all the investment in creating this major instrument, ERP, whatever it is. I mean, Oracle, all these instruments, right? Big companies behind that, and they make it in such a complex way. If they invest so much, you say, okay, I'm going to create something that actually one size pretty much kinda fits all, but that's not really the case. Right? So this products typically, and I'm not making I advocate it for or against.
No.
But what I'm saying is that the customization is very, very important, because sometimes you get this extraordinary product, and in the end, you still will be able to use it, but you're going to use perhaps a tiny part of it.
Exactly. It's what we were talking about, the functionalities.
Yes.
We need to make sure that all the functionalities that we need are in the system, and some in the solution, right, that we are implementing.
Yeah.
So some can be there, and some they don't adapt to the reality of the business.
Yeah. I give you one example that perhaps most people may be familiar with. For example, Outlook. It's an extraordinary, but you really start to dig in, and you can even put macros there, and it's extraordinary program. And I'm saying it really is. But how much really any person, even people that are familiar with use of the calendars, of the all these different applications, is so intricate. It's really amazing. Everything is connected. And how many people really use it, the whole thing? So you have used one, you have problems, and you find that, we tend to simplify things. Oh, this particular feature of this product, so you pick that, and you have this gigantic instrument. How much you use of that?
Yes.
The same thing happens with SAP and other things, right? But so perhaps I would say in the future, or maybe that's something that you might want to do in the future, but you have, instead of having all these major monsters, perhaps sell products that are just little units that solve different aspects of it. So a small company that say, well, let's incorporate scalability and granularity, let me put it that way. So let's incorporate this little instrument that solves, the inventory management. And perhaps it solves just one aspect of it.
Yes.
It doesn't solve the whole thing. But that, and it's something that will control this, that control, the purchase, the sale, the invoicing, and not the whole thing, and the projections, and then we're going to do this, and we're going to have blanket orders. And no. Just stay with the simple. And that could be scalable. That would be a good thing,
Yes, and we come back to the beginning. That we need to know what we need first, like that vision, those objectives, and then match what we need with the tools that we are considering. So that's a great example, Gustavo.
And as far as in particular for my case, the SAP or ERP any product for medical device, pharma medical industry. Well, one thing is the traceability of the product is a key thing that has to be there, and also the value, because of for example, as soon as you put, it's like a car. Well, a car is not really a good example, but like what I was saying earlier, bread in the supermarket. As soon as you put it on the shelf, the clock is ticking very quickly.
Yes.
And one day you want to sell it. At some point, the value of that item actually is less and less and less. And it costs you more and more and more because it's been sitting in the shelf, and it has a daily cost of just keeping it in the shelf.
Yes.
Right there.
Yes.
And there's all other kinds of costs, the opportunity costs, sunk costs, all kinds of things.
Yes, and you are talking about that relationship, right? Because we need to know units, the physical units, and also the impact on the financials, as you were saying.
Yes, so at some point you have to say, well, we have to, what is the value of what we have in inventory? The value what I think I have is not that value anymore because, hold on a second, first in, first out, last in, first out. No, the market is not paying more than it. Actually, I don't believe that at this moment, there may be perhaps will be proprietary some big companies that they have a way to actually, set the value of that perishable item. Real value, and market value, because it decreases. So that's one of the things. So the traceability of the products.
Yes, and that is also another challenge, right, with the ERP systems, and another challenge in our activities for being in supply chain, to keep all the data accurate. Because sometimes when we started this with SAP Business One, we did a big cleanup. So we had the item master cleanup, then we had the business partners cleanup too. But we need to keep having that data accurate so we can use the applications.
Right, and So earlier we were talking about the big failure. That failure became, like I said, the about phase, and became a success in the making. Let me put it that way, because the story goes that years after that missed opportunity to say, well, we could have done this and triplicated revenues, there was a further change in the management, and that created like a breath of fresh air into a company, and then allowed to unleash creative forces and improve the communication and bond with our suppliers, fewer suppliers. And this has been actually helping us to reduce the cost, not really reduce the cost, but at the same time, getting more involved, making our suppliers part of the, I would say, if you say like a family, but the sense that we're together in the same boat.
Yes.
In a way, right? Because with the customers and with the suppliers.
So, Gustavo, how do you do when people are not cooperating? When you are trying to accomplish this transformation? For example, when you are using your Excel spreadsheet or when you are using SAP, how do you do when people don't want to help?
Right. For me, what it works is to consider the first, try to be very, if possible, self-aware. What do I mean by that? What does it mean that they are not cooperative, right? And what is the expectation? What does it mean to be cooperative? What they are not cooperative? That expectation, is it well defined? Is it reasonable? Is it well communicated? Could it be that this resistance to cooperation actually there is a silver lining to it, and in the end is actually could help create not a confrontation, but a contraposition of ideas that could lead to a better define a better set of actions for that transformation that we want. Once all that is considered, say, okay, so try to really understand what is truly happening, right? Is it really that they don't want to cooperate? And okay, once that is clear, then how do I address it? Let's say that in actuality they are in the same boat. Yes. They want the same outcome for the company, but there is a discrepancy in how they see things, and therefore there is this kind of a reaction, resistance, right? So how to address that and say, well, maybe also with some level of humility, understand that, well, maybe what I thought that was the best way, perhaps that's not the best way. Perhaps there are other different ways of do things, or maybe the combination of both and just come up to something better in the end, yes. Right? But it may actually be, and then how you will deal with that once that's established, is how do you, with good communication skills, sometimes leadership skills, monitoring, persuasion, that may lead to a more positive and consensus outcome, and that satisfies everybody. Right?
Yes.
Because everybody in a way feels part of it. But it may be actually cases that with all that considered, it's just the resistance is simply just because of personal goals that are yes. not in sync with the company's goals. And then the people have sometimes passions that lead them to act in ways that are negative. Yes. And that's when every person has to will deal in different ways. We deal the way as we know. And I don't know if there is really, some people say, well, do this A, B, C, D, bullet points. I think that you have to first say, okay, how far do I want to go with this? How involved am I with this project? How much you want to invest of because it becomes, in a way, you're forced in situations like that to, I think, to be invested in a personal way.
Yes.
Because if there's a lot of irrational passions and jealousy and power struggles, whatever it is, and then you have to decide what you're going to do with it. So how involved you want to be with this, and you may or may not want to just continue the program. I mean, just try to put it in a ideally take it out of that context of irrationality and yes. put it in a way that is more fact oriented yes. and driven. Right?
About data than
right, but sometimes the reality is working where we humans are not that rational actually.
Yes.
Wall Street, buying things. You'd be surprised to know how much emotions and expectations, hopes, fantasies actually are involved in the process of buying stuff. If it wasn't advertising wouldn't exist.
No, that's true. And sometimes
The marketing,
we
right?
yes.
We're not being rational. Just put the facts there. They will decide by themselves. That's not the way it happens. You know, we make things happen.
Yes, and sometimes
Yeah.
we don't want to change. We
Yeah.
are comfortable in what we are doing. So.
That's true. Yeah. So the comfort zone. So all that needs to be. I would say first, try to understand what is happening, and with them, with me, with the whole project, and what is my role in all this, and what am I going to do with it? First, the self-awareness, and then first where I am, and then where I want to go, and then you devise the strategy.
Yes.
So it's difficult to deal with that because sometimes it's just there's really no solution because you're dealing with people that they won't change.
Yes.
It's not about the facts; it's about whatever personal goals or passions they have.
Well, Gustavo, thank you so much for being here. I would like to end this episode of the podcast with a quote from Michael Jordan. Then it is, some people want it to happen, some wish it would happen, others make it happen. And of course, Gustavo, you are in the last group.
Well, thank you, Marcia, for having me here. It's a pleasure, and thank you all the audience for watching.
Thank you very much.